Welcome to Talking Acting number 7 for 2022, but overall this is the 60th episode of Talking Acting. One of the things that has always amused me about comic timing is that no one can really explain it. I spent 2.5 decades listening to actors teasing each other if someone failed to deliver what people instantly recognised as good comic timing. So that's one of the things about comic timing, is when it's there, we get it and we know it's working because we laugh. But in that time, I never heard one actor clearly explain to another actor how to fix the problem. I didn't hear them explain what the key was to comic timing. And so I decided that I'd do some research on the internet, and the first thing that I came up with was a whole book where the title is called Comic Timing. I thought, brilliant, that's exactly what I'm looking for. But it turned out it was a book of poems about how life can unexpectedly change your expectations of what might happen. And so it was how life forced moments of comic timing upon us. A book of poems, no help. So I went to the internet to look for articles, and the first article I found was a masterclass one with an image of Steve Martin there, although he hadn't written this article. And it had 6 tips, but only one of them I found useful. So how do you measure whether it's useful or not? Well, I can only tell you how I do it, because when I'm teaching you to act, I'm explaining processes that firstly make sense to me, but beyond that are practical so that you can do them. And so I won't show you anything that, as far as an acting skill goes, that doesn't produce what I call a measurable response, where when you apply it, you can see direct outcomes. And so when I looked at those tips, I couldn't feel that, other than with one of them, that I could actually apply them. But the one that made sense to me was that comic timing creates expectation. Now, I don't know how to do that, but it actually makes sense to me that what happens when I laugh is that my expectations are suddenly changed. And so I kind of understood that one. The next article was a backstage one, because they put a good effort into exploring these topics. So the article that I discovered was the top 10 tips for becoming a comedy actor. And I found 3 of those tips were possibly useful. 3 out of 10. And the next article is what every actor needs to know about performing comedy. And 4 out of 5 of those tips were useful. So that was a much higher percentage rate of material that made sense. But as you can see, it's pretty clear that we can't instantly go to, this is what you need to do to have good comic timing, to deliver a good comedic performance. There's a lot of talk in these articles about pace, rhythm, and comic timing. But there wasn't a lot of clarity about how and why those things actually worked. But I did find an article that referenced work by Salvatore Attardo, who's a linguist at Texas A&M University, from 2011. And he was quoted as saying, "When we started out, we thought this folk theory of timing was correct." So what he's referring to is his belief that the way comic timing is generally referred to as folk theory, and he set about to do some quantitative research as to how comic timing worked. What we discovered is that it's complete nonsense, he apparently said. The data showed that timing changes are simply not a factor in the delivery of jokes, either in speeding up or slowing down or pausing before a punchline. So his research was that those things about pace and rhythm are not measurable in terms of the outcomes that they produce in terms of comic effect. But according to other psychologists quoted in this article, they felt that time seemed to stop while our brain is catching up with a clever punchline. Now that I found really interesting, that things appeared to stop, because that fits into our definition of how surprise works. What happens in a surprise is that you are unexpectedly interrupted and everything stops while you work out whether that interruption is a threat to you or not. So maybe punchlines and the thing that makes us laugh in a joke or in a scene is connected to moments of surprise. And that's what makes a lot of sense to me, because moments of surprise change our expectations. This article also quoted Bob Mankoff, who was the former cartoon editor for The New Yorker. And he offered the thought that jokes depend on surprise, the revelation of an unexpected meaning or idea, which stops the brain in its tracks. So again, this concept of surprise and an interruption to expectation is clearly articulated. In 2017, I directed a production of The Memory of Water, and at the end of the first read-through of that play, I said to the actors, "Well done, but that was a drama, and I want it to be a comedy." And one of the things that's also really interesting about this play is that the playwright herself, Sheila Stevenson, didn't realise that it was a comedy until she saw the first performance. And our production got a lot of laughs too. But we got a lot of laughs because it wasn't played as a tragedy or a drama, it was played as a comedy. And so we gave our audience permission to laugh, because an audience is not going to laugh at someone, or is rarely going to laugh at someone in great pain, because that's unkind. But they will laugh at someone who's having difficulty coming to terms with their pain. They will laugh at a character who maybe sees the irony in the situation or is confused by the possibilities or something. So it's important that the tone of the performance gives the audience permission to laugh. And what we found was that audiences laughed when their expectation was changed.
I haven't even got any friends. What will I have? What I don't like most of them. Especially the women.
So they laughed at moments where they thought a character's thoughts were running this way, but then they found they were running that way.
Every time, like with the men. I mean, what is it with men? I mean, I don't have a problem with men or anything. I love men. I've been together with 78 of them. I counted.
That line always got a laugh. And the laugh is built into the expectation that changes in the line. It's kind of a joke line, but we also got laughs just from ordinary situations when the audience would expect a behaviour to be like this, but it wasn't. It was like that. And we also got laughs when the characters in the play had a realisation that things weren't going the way they had expected, where their expectations had been interrupted. So we found there were numbers of sources for the audience to respond. And they were different, and they often varied from performance to performance. So it wasn't that you had the pause and exact duration that delivered the laugh. It was connecting the audience in a believable way to the circumstances and the relationships, to the story of the play, and then changing their expectations about what would happen. And we found that there were some tools that really helped that. And one of the tools was finding important words in a speech. And in fact, what we discovered was that if we found an important word in each line, the play got funnier. And if we found 2 important words in each sentence, it got even funnier. So why does that happen? Well, the only explanation I can provide you with for that makes any sense to me is that when you find important words in a speech, and particularly numbers of them, so from sentence to sentence, then what you do is bring point of view to what the character is doing. We clearly understand the character's point of view, and that's when we can have expectations about what their behaviour will be, and when that expectation gets interrupted, we laugh. So it's about understanding the character and understanding their point of view of the world that helps generate comedy. And the other thing that brings meaning and keeps the stakes up is keeping the ending of lines up. So if you keep the ending of the line up, again, you increase the character's purpose with what they're doing. And then when that purpose gets interrupted, the humour is exposed. And that's a great technique for drama as well, because having a clear purpose is a really strong ingredient for a good performance. But keeping endings up really, really helps the comedy. So those conventional views about pace and rhythm and this vague concept of what comic timing isn't a really productive help. Being real, creating real circumstances with characters with real points of view, set up the situation where we can change expectations of the character or expectations of the audience, and that's where the comedy lies.
If you found this approach to acting really helpful, there is more practical information in the link in the notes below. There's also a free download of an e-book, How to Succeed Where 70% of Actors Fail in Auditions. There's a lot more common sense, practical information there